there is a move away from the dollar. What are your thoughts on that? Do you see the de-dollarization trend accelerating to a point where we have a full bifurcation of the global monetary system?
I don't think you'll see like an instant state change in any way. As people lose confidence in the Western banking system, and if they lose confidence in the dollar, then it creates it catalyzes them to want to go to either barter, where they're directly bartering oil for food or oil for natural gas or commodities for manufactured products. They may consider that, or they look for other commodity monies and other commodity monetary networks. I think in the near term, that creates inefficiency and to a certain degree a bit of chaos. Like right now, the debate of, will Russia take rupees and will the Indians trade with the Chinese using CNY, and then who do I want to trust and what now do I want to trust? So there's a lot of chaos and a lot of inefficiency and a lot of friction, but it is inevitable. In the extreme, in theory, an Austrian economist would say, when the money fails, we're all ripped back to Stone Age barter. So in the extreme case, if there is no money or monetary network trusted by anybody, then you're going to barter, and you're just going to barter weapons for food, for commodities, for services. And of course, it's Stone Age barter, but the economy shrinks because barter is obscenely inefficient. So hence, maybe we'd like to have a commodity money, and we start searching. The king commodity isn't gold. The king commodity is Bitcoin, but the conventional commodity is gold. So when you start thinking about trading $1 billion of gold for $1 billion of fertilizer, the question becomes, A, how do you settle the gold? It's obscenely expensive to move it back and forth. B, it's not fast. How do I move it back and forth 100 times a month? And then C, how do I avoid getting ripped off, because you'll probably have it rehypothecated and inflated. In the history of gold, right? The fiction of gold is it's sound money. It's never been sound money. The history of gold is I can show you an incident every decade for the last 4,000 years where some ruler cheated using gold, debased the gold, issued notes against the gold, issued IOUs on the gold, or defaulted on the gold. It didn't just happen under Nixon. It didn't just happen under Roosevelt. It's happened over and over again. And it will happen again because gold itself isn't suitable as a high-velocity money. It's failed as high-velocity money for 150 years. So I think what will happen is the free market will scrounge around and experiment, trying all sorts of barter arrangements, trying swap arrangements, swapping the rupee for the ruble, swapping the CNY for some, name your favorite African currency you want to swap for. Don't know if there is one. And at some point, then they'll realize, well, I didn't trust the dollar, but why do I trust the Chinese more, right? I'm just moving from one currency system to another currency system. Some of them will try gold, some of them will try commodities. Gradually, people will discover Bitcoin, and they'll start to realize that the solution to the problem is Bitcoin, because it is high velocity money, which is not corruptible. But that won't happen quickly. That will happen in a slow boil over the course of 1, 2, 3 decades. And I would say that the de-dollarification, or the embracing of commodity money, it's an auspicious catalyst on the periphery. That now the unthinkable is now thinkable. It's now clear that we have certain factions with money that are trying to figure out what they do in a world without the Western banking system, and they don't have a good answer yet. But what it starts a fire burning. It's a spark. The fire is going to burn brighter and brighter and brighter, and objective traders that are in the middle are going to start to see the virtues of backing their financial instruments with Bitcoin, or using Bitcoin directly, at some rate. I don't know what rate.
effects?
These are edge effects. They're happening on the edge. There's incredible, extraordinary inertia in the Western world between Western Europe and the United States and all the banks that trade and all the institutions that trade and the dollar. And that inertia is going to continue to support that system for a long, long time. The right way to think of it is Bitcoin is about $500 billion of monetary value right now against $500 trillion of financial instruments that are somewhat liquid that have value. And so that makes it 10 basis points. And so what reasonably should happen is it will, on the edge, continue to encroach and creep up, and it'll go from being 0.1% to 0.5% to 1% to 2% to 4% to 6% to 8%. But when Bitcoin is 10 million a coin, right, it still might not be 10, 15%. It will be one of a number of assets, and it will gradually drain off monetary energy, but there will be other assets. All assets are in competition with each other. It's not just currencies. Bitcoin is in competition with gold. Bitcoin is in competition with your second Airbnb apartment that you buy in order to generate rents off it. It's in competition with commercial real estate, in competition with ETFs, bond funds, not just sovereign bonds. It's in competition with corporate debt and mortgage-backed securities and the like. And all of these assets are in competition as a store of value. And then you have all these currencies in competition with each other, the US dollar and the CNY and every other currency. As long as nation states exist, they'll have currency. And the assets will continue to compete. And then if you happen to be in that situation where you live in a country where you don't have a reliable currency, if I lived in a war zone and the currency collapsed and I don't have an American bank in the war zone and the local bank is not trustworthy, at that point I'll adopt Bitcoin as my bank and I'll adopt Bitcoin as my currency, but that's because law and order broke down in that war zone for me. As long as I live in China, I'll use a Chinese bank and the Chinese currency. And when I live in the U.S., I'll use the U.S. banks and the U.S. currency. But you will see examples. You're seeing it right now. In Lebanon, they've abandoned the local currency and they're dollarizing because the banks failed, the currency failed. And people from Lebanon will tell you that dollar is the currency. And in El Salvador, after their civil war, their currency failed, so they adopted the dollar.